I have recorded multiple things with that exact same thing where they would be like, hold on, like we're gonna have to take like an hour here because I have to like figure out the actual key so that we
I
could,
have to commit some crimes on a
yeah.
very like minute level.
And then they go into whatever Yahoo or Google and type in like key generator, and you literally watch the guy that's gonna record you do that. It's great. That's awesome.
Yeah. What's up, my friends? Thanks again for tuning in. This is the Scoped Exposure podcast. You know, as we're kind of coming towards the tail end of season 3, I always kind of go back into the archives as far as like early days, like Scope stuff and like different bands that we got to cover in the 2018s and the 2019s. And, we've had Tyler from Foreign Hands and also Wristmeetrazor on the podcast before, but someone who I guess maybe either I overlooked unintentionally or kind of popped up as a new idea to have on the podcast just with new music on the horizon for them was Justin. So I reached out, and I love I love when I reach out to a guest and it's like so quick to like set it up in the calendar, and here we are. So Justin of Wristmeetrazor and Spirit World on the motherfucking Scoped Exposure podcast. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you for having me. No, this is one of the ones that we did our last record, Replica of a Strange Love. Tyler did that interview, but I watched it and I was like, man, that was cool. I want to do that one. So here we are.
Tyler is actually one of the only guests who has, been a supporter not only through listening, but also through the Bevs sponsorship. So I remember that we had like a chai alternative from Vancouver, and he bought it and tried it on the show, and he was about it. So that as a Bev head, that meant a lot to me. So I like that we're connecting the dots here and doing a number 2 for the band.
Well, Wristmeetrazor is a Bev band, so we definitely are all very about the whole thing. So very cool.
I know that with the new record coming up, you guys kind of did like a very specialized and tailored website, and I have to applaud you for having kind of like the fuel type as far as what everyone's go-to drinks are. I was like, this is my type of shit. So I'm kind of curious if Bev wise you're bringing what your fuel type on the website is, or if you're straying from the path a little bit.
The fuel type on the website, because the website was done by Elaine, our bass player, that fuel type's probably Monster Energy for sure.
Or
that's for her. We all kind of have different fuel types, because I'll drink, typically I drink whatever. So earlier today I did coffee, and now I've switched to the Pepsi Zero, which which was the move for the entire recording process of Degeneration. That was the Bev. That was honestly the chill Bev that kind of like calmed everything down, because we did a lot of we drink a lot of coffee, like, as a band we drink a lot of coffee. And Randy LaBeouf, who did the record and promoted and co-wrote it and did the whole thing, he is really big into like specialized kind of cold brews and coffees and stuff like that. And so we would do like very, very high concentrated caffeine early in the day. And so the nighttime one was always having to do something like Pepsi. So we did do
you need something to kind of like balance it out. Like if you're like, I'm personally a fan of drinking one type of Bev like all throughout a recording process, because then I can be like, this whole record is fueled by X.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
like,
I agree. I do like that a lot. I like that idea a lot. We're just so advanced into the Bev thing that I think we can't even be satiated by one. Like there's not even one thing that can possibly satiate us throughout the whole day. So it ends up evolving, because typically mine my drink of choice is Red Bull.
Hmm.
However, I've came to the point where if I drink coffee in the morning and then I do Red Bull later, that's a tour only thing.
Oh,
If I'm
interesting.
It's so
Okay.
much caffeine, like the caffeine overload, like doing that at home every day. Not only does it like build up this crazy tolerance that I don't like on the road, but it
Mhm.
also kind of breaks the special kind of nature of it. So if I need the caffeine, then I'll do coffee and then either Monster or Red Bull later. But if it's just a normal at home day, then I'm always going. I mean, I always start with coffee, so then afterwards I'll slow it down with something
Mhm.
less.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I like, the self-awareness as far as like, yeah, because definitely when you're on the road, like you can, if you need that extra like kind of kick in the teeth for like
Mhm.
your live performance and all that. Yeah. Like my band, our one of our like traditions is like we like it kind of cycles member to member of who buys a 4-pack of Red Bull, and then we
Mhm.
all like
That's
kind of
awesome.
like everyone sips on it, but I'm the only one who shotguns it because I'm like,
Mhm.
I need that like full high octane, like, like Fast and Furious, like pedal to the metal mode
Yeah.
just
You
before I start playing. But
you and
yeah,
I
like,
you and I are definitely on the same mindset with that because that's exactly what I do. Like I will crush like if I have to get a Red Bull after drinking coffee in the morning, I'll crush that thing in probably about 30 seconds. Just
right.
to like it's not even about the taste most of the time. Even though I do really like the taste of Red Bulls, so I'll always give them that kind of those props, but for the most part, if I'm doing the Red Bull right before a show or right before a drive, it's all just so I could get up, so I could wake up a little bit.
Yeah. Like it's just not really much of a like a sippy kind of drink for me, which is kind
No,
of interesting to kind of like transition into what Bev I'm
yeah.
bringing on. It is an energy drink, and I don't. It's been only in the recent months that I've seen it kind of trickle into some grocery chains in Canada here. So
Hmm.
I'm drinking
Oh,
a Celsius, but
oh, we
it's the white peach vibe.
that's awesome. Yeah, we've done a little bit of Celsius. Brian, our drummer, he usually goes into the weird energy drink section a little bit, and so
Right.
he's done Celsius a little bit. Sometimes Tyler will do some weirder ones. I'm very predictable with my energy drinks, so it's always Red Bull, rarely Monster, but sometimes it's Monster, but most of the time it's Red Bull for me.
Mhm.
However, I mean, like I said, we are Bev connoisseurs, so we scour that Bev section. I'm very
Dude,
well aware of what's in there. I see
yeah,
it.
yeah. Well, I got to cheers you first before
Yeah,
we
of
move
course.
on. The Bev
Cheers.
chats have been S tier so far.
Awesome.
Um, but yeah, very recently, man, that's crazy. I
Yeah.
just that
Yeah.
is a peach vibe.
Yeah. I've done one of the Celsius. I think maybe I did like a mango Celsius at one point, just kind
Mhm.
of to try it out, and it was really good. I liked it a
Yeah.
lot. Like a
The
lot.
I think one of the last Bev things before we start getting into the music chats,
Uh-huh.
recently, this year I've been wanting to do a lot more like in person stuff. Like this is great because it can, like I said, like I could reach out to you, we can set it up and release it next week if we really wanted to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But aligning when bands are coming through either Calgary, where I'm based, or like going to a fest and doing some stuff with bands who are playing. Like
Hmm.
that's a big goal for me this year. And my thing is like, don't bring the bevs, I'll bring it. So
Right.
there was like a little 1 day fest here in Calgary earlier this month, and we've been releasing some of these like mini pods
Hmm.
with some of the people that we chatted with, and I self curated like all the bevs. So it wasn't just like, oh, I'll grab a Pepsi and a Diet Coke. It's like, okay, I'm grabbing this crazy Canadian
Yeah.
sparkling water. I'm bringing this nitro cold brew. I'm bringing this. So
Yeah, I love
I'm
that.
hoping that I get to do a little bit more of that
Yeah.
in the months to come. So
Yeah, that sounds awesome. If we play Calgary, I would love that because that's one of my favorite things, man. Like I love it. I love it when we show up to a show and then there's someone there that like kind of like has us like covered already. That's awesome to me. And
right.
also, we love sparkling water. I really love sparkling water too, and that's not even on a caffeine side. That's just on a weird clean
That's
water
just a I
taste.
need to drink something side.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like we love bevs. I just like to have something to drink. So that's cool.
Hmm. So let's get into some chats about the band. Since
Sure.
you're new here, Justin, I always like to kind of start the same question for anyone who's new here on the show. Just kind of getting a little bit of context about their origin, about how they got into like DIY music, hardcore metal, like however you want to spin it. So, do you remember exactly whether it was a riff, a song, a band that kind of like initially put you on the path, or where did everything start for you?
So I started listening to metal in, I would say, 2000, 1999, somewhere in there. Um, it wasn't necessarily that I really like kind of knew anyone that listened to it. I found it all on my own. Like I didn't have a big brother or a friend or any of that. Like um, I remember uh, playing Tony Hawk when it came out in 2000. I was already kind of getting into music like that, but that first Tony Hawk game came out, and that subsequently happened at the same time that my family really like actively used the internet. We had AOL when I was in the 90s when I was in middle school, but I didn't really use it to the same extent that like people use the internet now. I just kind of
Right.
used it for I think I really only used it to talk to friends and send emails for maybe 30 minutes like a week. Like I never used it. The internet was very different in the 90s for sure.
Very
Um,
much so. Yeah.
and then
Kids today
but
don't know.
they don't know at all. But by the time the year 2000 came around, my family got they got a cable they got cable modem, which
Mhm.
meant that instead of it being 56K, which essentially took 30 minutes to load a website, which is what I was trying to do before. But even then, like I couldn't really look stuff up. Once we got cable modem, everything changed. And then I would look up music all day long. Um, there used to be different websites. Like there was a website, called CD Now that would just list kind of CDs, just active CDs. So you could just look up the song titles and stuff like that. And so I had no idea what it sounded like. I would just like look up stuff that I thought sounded cool. Um, and this was
Like
in
like there's no artwork. It's just like the name of like
there.
the song or the band, right?
Yeah, so there was artwork. There was artwork. There was the band name and then the song titles, but there was no music. Like there was no way for me to listen to it on there. Like you was just like
Oh, okay.
it was here, and that was also pre buying things online really either. So there really wasn't even a way to buy it. Like you could just see that it existed. It was basically like an archive for the most part. I
Right.
think as it grew, it became a site that you could buy stuff from. But in the year 2000, probably early 2000, maybe actually no, take that back, late 99, early 2000, it was just like, kind of just there. And so I would do that. I would write like I had like a notebook where I would physically write down these songs and then I'd wait for them to come on the radio because there was an alternative radio station in Vegas that
Mhm.
really tipped me off. So I would do that and then I would tape them on cassette tapes and then I would play those cassette tapes and listen to them. That was how I listened to music in
Wow.
99 and
That's
2000.
dedication and a
Yeah,
half.
super, super, super like basically just once I got into the record or to the radio station, which was 1075 in Vegas, they would play basically all of the most popular stuff at the time. And they would play like older 90s stuff. Like they would play Danzig and then they'd play Korn and then they'd play Rob Zombie and then they'd play like Jane's Addiction and then they'd play like Marilyn Manson. Like it was very 90s radio.
Right.
And that was essentially the stepping point for all of that because I would listen to that and kind of like get ideas and I'd go online and try to find stuff and then on whatever primitive message boards existed people would be like, oh, you like this band, so go check out this band. And then I would do that, and then even on this like CD Now website sometimes they would have like listed like if there was like a feature on a record you could just kind of follow those, and so some of them I
Mhm.
would just follow as like the features and stuff like that and who was on the same record label. And just very like I would just go through all the Roadrunner record releases and just look at all those. And they were all like similarly vibed as far as like the song titles go, the band names go, the the album art goes. So like that, I ultimately got into heavy music that way. But I think a lot of people that grew up in the 2000s, their parents were kind of like hip to it, but my parents were not hip to it at all.
Mhm.
And I was raised Catholic, so they didn't like it actually at all. They didn't even like the radio stations. Like we would listen to the radio station in the car. My mom would change it, like because she would just be like,
Oh. You're
Like,
like, you have your notepad. You're like, no, I'm
yeah,
matching everything together.
like it would be like a corn song would come on. She'd be like, I don't like this guy's voice, and then she'd change it. And then it'd be like a Slipknot song would come on from self-titled, like probably Wait and Bleed because I was the only one that got played on the radio. And she'd be
Mm.
like, I saw this album cover in Best Buy and I don't like the way they look, so change it. Like, so that's basically how it started. And then Manson, she always hated because in
Mhm.
the '90s that was Public Enemy #1. So anytime his songs came on, I never heard more than 5 seconds of those.
Mhm.
But ultimately, that is kind of what grew into like, well, now I like have to know what it is because they
Yeah,
won't
of
let me listen
course.
to it. So no, I have to know what it is. So I became kind of obsessed with it, and then just
Mhm.
finding it out and searching it. And so that just
Yeah.
kind of grew. I did that, and then from there, I became obsessed with music. And on top of that, the internet was like getting big. So then it became easier and easier. I got Napster in 2000, so then I would start downloading them. Which even then you couldn't download everything. You could download some things, but I would try to get into like the harder to find stuff, and that wasn't easy to download at all. Like
Mhm.
a lot of that needed to be like bought. So there was a Virgin Megastore in Vegas that had every CD. So then Christmas time, when I'd have Christmas money, I would spend like $120 all on CDs. I'd buy like 12 CDs and that's it. I would just spend it all at Virgin Mega.
Mm.
Buying the CDs of the ones that I found, the things I found on CD now, I'd just go and buy them in person. But yeah, that obsession kind of just grew. The internet grew. And when I got to high school, I started getting into hardcore and stuff like that, death metal and black metal and just all kinds of like harder to find genres. And at the time, it was pretty difficult to get into. Like I didn't know anyone that liked stuff like that.
Yeah.
But my high school had a bunch of kids that liked hardcore and metalcore, and we were um, it was all early 2000s stuff. So we all kind of like banded together and we would go to shows. No one understood it. It definitely wasn't like popular enough to where people like knew what straight edge was or what any of that was. Um,
Mhm.
we got gang profiled for being straight edge at one point. We would fight the baseball players all the time because they didn't understand. They would just call us goth and like make fun of us. And for the most part, like homophobic slurs and all that stuff, like they didn't really care. Like
Right.
so we would end up fighting those guys all the time. We would fight all kinds of bros and stuff like that. And like that was my intro into hardcore. It was like this very tight knit family of people that was similar to like the music that I got into when I was younger, but it was a little bit more extreme and like the community was definitely more of a community. So
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think the
yeah,
first thing that's very interesting to me is like, usually when people come on the podcast, like there's someone that they accredit like putting them on or kind of
yeah,
like unintentionally doing that.
yeah.
And there are like I would almost if I'm just throwing rough numbers right now, there's maybe like a 10% of everyone who's like I didn't have an old head. I didn't have an older brother or
Right.
an older sibling to kind of show me the way. So like I guess when you like what was like the one quality that kind of stirred this obsession for you to like maybe you like realize that you're on an island but you're like this is the I just know that this is the path and this is the way. Like
Uh,
what was it specifically?
I was just a sensitive, weird kid that didn't have a ton of friends, but had a lot of like had a lot of ideas, and I was really artistic and creative and wanted to do all these things, but like I think people don't really necessarily understand this, but in the '90s, being different was very, very not cool. Like
Mm,
you, not only were you made fun of, but you were outcasted if you didn't fit
right.
into certain norms, any kind of norms, gender norms, societal norms, any of those, religious norms. If you didn't follow into those, or if you were in those and then you strayed away, you were outcasted immediately. Um, and so that's why I mean, typically in my life, I've been the old head. Even when I was young, I was the old head. You know, even when I was young, I was the guy that like my friends would come to and be like, they'll burn me a CD, you know, or what music are you listening to, or like what do you want,
Mhm.
like what do you think is cool out right now? And like I would just kind of like show other people stuff because I felt it was something that was so important in my life that I needed to invest a lot of time into it, and I did. You know, that's it was the thing that I invested a lot of time into. In my like younger years, I played sports. I did the sports thing all through like elementary and middle school, and And I had made some friends through that, but I didn't really like that. You know what I mean? Like I was fine. Like it wasn't even that I was like necessarily super bad at like soccer and hockey and football and stuff like that. I just didn't really like enjoy it as much. And I had a lot more aspirations like artistically and emotionally, and that comes from music straight
Mhm.
up. Like there's really no other way to express that than music and art, and music was what spoke to me, so that's kind of where I went with it.
Yeah. And so, like, kind of fast forwarding a little bit when you get to middle school and high school and you start to see, maybe not the same, like everyone having the same kind of background as far as discovering music, but, you're on the same, you know, you're definitely on the same tree and you might be somewhere in close proximity of the same branch. But
Right, right,
like
right.
having that, like, you know, more of a nomad experience of like discovering music and then finding other people, like did did you feel like that was a missing piece as far as like finding community with people to kind of share in this kind of weirder, heavier type of music, or was it kind of just like a cherry on top?
No, no, I was totally a missing piece because it
Mhm.
it was it was like I enjoyed, especially the early days of being online. I enjoyed being online and joining chat rooms and doing that whole thing. And I did meet people through that. I've met people that I even still talk to this day through the early 2000s chat room thing. But ultimately, like it's so different when it comes to like going to concerts, going to shows, like with people, having friends there. Like it's night and day. And I think once I first noticed that, I was like, oh, this is like there's like a community here. This is like a thing. This is a scene.
Mhm.
It changed a lot. You know what I mean? It made a lot of things different. And I mean, I still to various extents, like, I mean, I enjoy doing stuff in like the goth scene and other scenes that aren't the hardcore scene, and like I could still see a lot of the same roots of camaraderie that all kind of exist in all of it, you know?
Mhm. So I guess like as you're kind of discovering all of these things, kind of getting into your later teens, like when does the idea of like not just listening to this music, but like playing and kind of doing the thing that you're watching all of these big rock stars who are doing at the time, like did you start on bass? Did like you sing first? Like what was kind of like your first entry point into that?
So I always I always wanted to play music. Like that was kind of like from the very beginning, I was like, oh, this is something I need to do. Um, my issue wasn't necessarily that I didn't have the will to do it. It was that I didn't have the knowledge to do it. Like I didn't know how.
Right.
And like I said, my family was not a musician family. Like they had no idea how to like help me. So there was no guidance. Like I wasn't guided by anyone. I was guided
Yeah.
by myself, my will to power, and then just doing it. And so ultimately with I first started with playing bass. I got a little practice amp and a P bass in like 2001 or maybe 2000. I can't remember. And I started doing that. And then shortly after, I kind of wanted to do like a bass vocalist thing because I didn't know enough people that played music to have like a do it by myself kind of thing. So I played bass and did vocals, or I tried to do that in like these like smaller, like alt metal bands that I was in like ninth grade.
Hmm.
Um, they weren't good, but no one's first bands are good.
No.
But I would try to do that. I talked my parents into letting me play in like my garage. So my friend that played drums and my friend that played guitar, we would all come together in my garage and just make a lot of noise. And then we'd record it through I had like a set essentially. But back in the day, boom boxes, a lot of them had record features that actually
Oh,
had like
really?
some
I
sort
didn't know
of
that.
yeah, boom boxes were very versatile. And so I had one
Hmm.
that had like a record feature that had some sort of mic. I can't remember what kind of mic it had. It had some sort of mic. Whatever it was specialized to where if you hit record, a certain record on it, you could record straight to the tape. So that's basically what we did. We
Interesting.
recorded,
Okay,
we
cool.
sat in a room and I hit record and it hit recorded straight to a tape. But we were at an interesting enough point where music had mostly kind of gone to either CDs, not online per se, but mostly to CDs. So no one
Right.
really had tapes anymore, but people didn't listen to music online. So what I did was I recorded it through. I had and this one was really really janky. I had like a headset with a microphone on it for like the most archaic webcamming that exists, where it was just like one picture every 3 seconds. But like
Sure.
the mic kind of worked. I would use it for like Yahoo chat, which was another very, very old, old chatting kind of thing. But what I did was I took the cassette, I put it in like one of my Walkman, and then I put the mic up to the headphone, and then I recorded it that way onto my computer. So it was basically three levels of recording. And then once I did that, then I burned it to a CD, and then I brought it to my high school, and then I passed it out, and they all threw them away probably immediately. They,
Right.
I guarantee I had probably printed like
You're like, do you
50.
understand how much work
Yeah.
I've done just to get this in your
Well,
hands,
and then I would
in your
also,
ears?
I also like created like the album art. Like I would do a bunch of stuff, and then we would just hand them out for free. And I think almost all of them are gone. But one of my friends had told me a year or two ago that he kept his, and that was awesome. So
Mm.
they exist somewhere, but not many places.
Yeah,
Not many.
yeah.
Mostly in garbage dumps in Las Vegas. They're
Yeah,
there
yeah.
somewhere.
So
Some massive
if you're
landmine.
doing any dive in and want to hit
Mhm.
some landfills, and hopefully things haven't,
If you
denigrated too much.
Yeah, if you could dig far enough, you could probably find a completely disintegrated CD with cracks all in it, but you might be able to pick out the lettering, and if so, that's awesome.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, it's crazy how or how easier things are to like just do some like at home demos and shit like that. Cause like, you know, like you're a few years older than me, but I remember just the first time going to a recording studio to even just like
Mhm.
do that, and it felt like whoa, like, and it
It's
wasn't even
crazy,
like
right?
a crazy kind of experience, but now people can like literally record, like write a demo on a Wednesday, record it on a Thursday,
Mhm.
post it on Bandcamp on Friday, and then like blow up and go viral on Twitter over the
Uh,
weekend. You know, like
Straight up.
it's a lot different from what a lot of bands from like the 90s and early 2000s kind of had to deal with. You had to kind of just find a way, and
You know what?
you found one. So
What's even crazier, man, is that like when I really think about it, I didn't record in what was like actually a studio until 2005 when I recorded I was in the band Molotov Solution from Vegas. I recorded the first EP there, and we weren't recording in a studio. And that was the first time I had ever been in a studio. And then after that, I didn't go back to a studio until the first Spirit World stuff. So it was literally like a
wow.
decade later. Like, and that, so that really goes to show you, like, between the time I very first started music in 2000 and then 2015, I was only recorded in studios twice. Everything
Mhm.
else was in someone's bedroom, which I did a bunch, or just some other, like someone's garage. Like, it was always very, very, like, not high tech. Um,
Right.
and I think a lot of people don't realize that like, this kind of thing where everyone records in a studio, this is a very new invention.
Mhm.
This was not around hardcore, metalcore, anything. Anyone's band. No one's band was recording in studios. Because even in 2005, when Molotov Solution recorded in a studio, it was like a massive deal to us. Like that was like a huge, gigantic deal that was like everyone knew about it. Everyone knew we were going to record in studio, and it was huge. And now it's like every band that you've heard has recorded in some studio. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I don't know. It's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And it's interesting too how like maybe like one of the biggest bands, like a band like I'll use Speed as an example. Like a
Mhm.
band like that could record in like the most bougiest and fanciest like recording studio in Australia,
Right.
but they could also do it in like a person's garage and
Yeah.
like, you know, like I'm sure there's going to be some technical producers who are going to be pushing up their glasses and be like, well, actually, but I
Right.
feel like the product that you can create in the genre sphere that we live in is going to be pretty like apples and oranges. It
Yeah.
might be
Yeah.
subtly different, but not like a totally different type of cuisine or anything like that.
For
And
sure.
I
For
think that's
sure.
kind of cool.
And what I've noticed has happened is that the like actual producers that produce in studios, they've had to step their game up because they realize that the DAWs and the Pro Tools, like Reaper, all that stuff is so accessible to you if you on your computer that you could create the whole record yourself. So
Sure. Yeah.
you have to give the band something that's not accessible from their home computer, which they do now. But what makes it interesting is even that isn't exactly an old thing. Like all of this is pretty new. Like
Mhm.
these are all pretty new in the grand scheme of things. Like transgressions that have happened that has made the recording and the being in a band thing very different than it used to be. Because
Right.
ultimately, yeah, you would record in someone's garage, but it wasn't through like Pro Tools. Like it was through some like very basic whatever and Apple. I can't even think of what the one is called on Apple, but whatever the most
Oh, the
basic
GarageBand?
GarageBand. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they would hit record in GarageBand and you just start doing it and they would probably crash a bunch, but you know.
If someone's like, "Oh, I need to randomize the key generator this
Right,
time because it's
right.
it's
You know,
required."
dude, you know what's funny is I have recorded multiple things with that exact same thing where they would be like, "Hold on, like we're gonna have to take like an hour here because I have to like figure out the actual key so that we
I
could."
have to commit some crimes on a
Yeah,
very like minute level.
and then they go into whatever Yahoo or Google and type in like key generator, and you literally watch the guy that's going to record you do that. It's great. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I I feel bad that like younger bands might never have the opportunity to do that because it's very cool. It's a
Yeah.
very cool way to record.
Yeah. I definitely relate to that on a like as a video editor, there was
Mhm.
ways that I had to go around to get like my Premiere subscription or whatever. But nowadays it's like, there's so many free tools and it's also kind of like the classic like, well, it's just that for me, it's like a subscription that I might probably will have for the rest of my life because I
Yeah,
need to use that for doing this, my 9 to 5 job. So it is what it is. But it's crazy that to think that there's generations who will never have to worry about that.
never, never, man.
Never.
It's insane. I mean, I like it though. I think the progression of music is very important. Like
Sure.
it's important that everything moves to the future and doesn't, stagnate into whatever, that we grew up in. But with
Mhm.
that said, I hope that at some point, they're able to experience something like that because
Right.
it's important to be able to appreciate the lower quality, lower fi kind of situation. So then when you do record something that's meaningful, it's something you've worked for. Because
Yeah.
at that point, when you're recording something with good recording that you like, that means something to you, it's going to mean so much more that it sounds so much better than your other stuff because it's the first time you actually did it, in that way.
Right. So talk to me about like the very beginnings of Wrist
Mhm.
and I think just kind of doing some research and looking on the site, I think at the current time, are you the only like current like founding member of the band still, or am I misunderstanding some of those things?
No, no, I think that's a fair assessment. So the band's interesting in a way that it started as kind of like a bedroom project that our old guitarist Jonah did. He was more so into kind of like keeping it pretty mysterious. So as it started in 2017, it was very, very low key. It didn't have members even. I don't even think the band camp or anything involved with the band said who was in it until months and months after all that stuff came out.
Sure.
Um, he did it kind of all by himself, and I'm not even sure if there was ever any aspirations to turn it into a real band, but I did hit him up after I heard it the first time and was like, his name wasn't on it, but I did know it was him because he was
Right.
the only one posting about it. So I had hit him up.
Mystery solved.
Yeah, the mystery was solved
Detective
there.
Justin on the scene.
But he did a good job at it with it because I feel like he posted it like, I found this and it's sick. You should listen to it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
Asking for a friend, is this sick?
yeah. And on top of that, like that time period in 2017, there were like metalcore and screamo Facebook groups that were always like looking for new bands, and so that's where it appeared first.
Right.
As well as his own personal pages, it was on that, and so I hit him up and I was like, I mean, if you want to do this as a serious project, I was in between bands. I know he used to be in some other band that he was in between bands, and I was like, if you want to do this serious project, I'm very down. We can just figure it out, and that's basically what happened. We we got another dude to play drums, and then shortly after that, he was kind of like tooling with ideas for the EPs. I would spit back some ideas for how I thought that they should go. He pre-pro'd them for the most part, and then I kind of wanted to do my own bass lines on them. So a lot of the tracks ended up kind of going into the studio like that. We all went to separate studios. We recorded in three different separate studios. Um, with very little direction, honestly. Like we recorded in three different separate studios. Jonah and I had talked about it a lot before we went and did it, but for the most part, it was kind of like very stream of conscious kind of record. Like it was pre-pro, but then I've written bass lines for it that he hadn't really heard, and then I wrote lyrics for a couple of the tracks that I think maybe I'd shown him, but also I might have changed them in the studio. It was all kind of off the cuff. And yeah, and that's how that record came out. And it ended up getting mixed and I guess kind of mastered. I can't remember if the same dude mastered them by a dude named Zach Rippey in Arizona who was doing sound for like Code Orange at the time. And he was a friend of mine. And I just basically told him that we were looking for kind of a Norma Jean, Bless the Martyr mix on it, and he did that. So that's the reason why it sounds the way it does is on purpose, because it was recorded it was all recorded in studios and done pretty pro, but we definitely wanted it to sound a certain way, and it did. But yeah, and then that was basically how the band started. We got on Hope for Shelter Fest in 2017, and there was generally just immediate hype after we put out the EPs, and people were into it. So we were like, well, might as well continue doing this because there is something that's gravitating people towards the band, and so that was where that went. Shortly after that, we got Brian to play drums, Brian Prosser. He was in Inclination and Shame and a couple other bands at the time, and so we got him to play drums. And then after that we got Tyler about a year after that, and then and within the last like 2 years, 2.5 years or so, we got Elaine to play bass, so I didn't play bass and sing anymore. I could just do singing. And then Jonah left in early 2020, or actually no, early 2022, and then Nate from Heavens Die took that spot, and that's where we're at. That's the lineup.
So I want to throw it back a little bit to 2019. So this is the first. I'm trying to remember if I've seen you guys at any other festivals, but this might be it. So this is this is when I guess it's kind of like the the latest addition is Tyler. So I think Tyler either must have just joined the band or he's the newbie as far as that's concerned.
He did that.
And you guys were on tour with See You Space Cowboy, which I want to get into in a little bit, because I think you guys were kind of like not like a package deal, but you were a dynamic duo that really like did a lot together in those early years. But I remember when I was filming that fest, I think I'm blanking on who y'all had as your TM for that tour. but I remember,
Colin Feeney was teaming.
yeah. So I remember Colin was, I can't remember if I was a part of this conversation or just overheard it because
Mm-hmm.
I'm just standing on stage waiting for you guys to play. But there was a hesitancy of like, if no one moshes, like I have to be the one to just fully, be a mosh menace for everyone. But I think you guys had like a really awesome response at that fest, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you can recall some of those moments from the last time you guys played in Calgary.
Yeah, no, I totally remember all of that. So that tour in particular was a very interesting tour. That was one of the first Space Cowboy tours after, actually, maybe it was the first US tour that they did after being signed to Pure Noise. It was
Hmm.
our first full US after being signed to Prosthetic. And our two bands were like always pretty, we're always pretty inexplicably connected, and we still, in a lot of ways, we still are, especially to the kids. Like, no matter what the bands sound like, I think they'll always be connected in the minds of a lot of the kids that have got into us, especially around that time period, which is cool because I love Space Cowboy and I love everything they do. I love all the new stuff. That's all great.
Hmm.
So for that tour, which was very unique, which I've never done any tour like this before, we were all in the same van. So we had every member of Space Cowboy and every member of Wristmeetrazor in a 16 passenger van traveling this like the country, which was super. I mean, ultimately, the reasoning behind it was so that we could both make money, and we did. We made a lot of money being able to do that. Like that is,
Hmm.
it was very uncomfortable but very profitable. So like it was a smart way to tour for sure.
Hmm. So,
Um,
and the only crossover member at the time was Brian because he was
Brian,
doing
yeah,
double duty on the drums.
yeah, and I think that also played into like why we would share, the same van. It
Right.
helped a lot that Brian was in both bands at that time. Uh, that was Tyler's very first tour. He had never toured with us before, and we had actually never really hung out with Tyler long term. So it was a hell of a first go for him. He got thrown right into the fire with that one, which I remember before it happened, before the tour happened, we did like one practice, and we really only, I think we only ran the set one single time with Tyler, and I was all like, I hope you're good because this is a lot. And then immediately, the first show we played was a sold out show in Chicago, and so he got thrown directly into the fire. But he killed it. He's great. He's a very very good musician. So it ended up working
Mhm.
out great there. But it was stressful. It was a stressful first tour. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It was great. And as far as Canada goes, Canada was amazing. We showed up to Wild Rose, and it ended up being at that point our favorite show that we had ever played. Like, and there was hesitation as to whether it was going to be like moshing or whatever, but at the same time, I mean, I the fact that there were people that wanted to see us there was awesome. So
Mhm.
I was
And
stoked.
I think also just it's important to note that like I think it's a lot different now, especially like post COVID times, like
Mhm.
where I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of people that have gravitated to all the random little niches of the scene. But I
right.
think you're like, there was a lot of excitement and hype, like you were saying, when it was like kind of the mysterious project and like kind
Mhm.
of playing on a type of metalcore that maybe wasn't as common at the time.
Right.
But I think it was still early in some cases where like you get the macho like hardcore dudes that are listening to like Marauder and Hatebreed being like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Did you like am I right on the money here, or do you feel like there's some extra context that's needed? Because I just felt like there was, you guys kind of paved the way for a lot of the stuff that's happening like right now.
Thank you.
That's my
I appreciate that because I think that too a lot of the times. I as far as that goes, that was definitely there. And that's still there today, like for a lot of things. But
mm,
we were never super worried about that because there's a lot of our friends, because we all grew up in the hardcore scene, like all of us did. So we've all always had a lot of friends that respected us for being ourselves more so. Because I
mm,
think ultimately what maybe some of the younger generations don't get, or maybe what they're starting to understand now, is that being yourself will always kind of like shine through, and like even the like toughest aspects of of hardcore will respect you for being yourself and not trying to be them, not trying to be like a tough guy or write about like beating people up or whatever. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
um being yourself, just being the weirdo that you are, especially if you are a weirdo, like you will be respected for that way more than you would be if you were some sort of fake tough guy. That's
Mhm.
how I've always seen it too.
Yeah. And I feel like it's again, I think that there's just something that happened where, the world ending aspect and then everyone's kind of just like weirdly open their minds to being like, "Oh, I'm going to check out Scram a little bit more. I'm going to
Right,
check
right,
out this." But I
right.
feel like I think you've hit it right on the money as far as like I have more respect for bands that are like so authentically themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and if they're doing that like really, really well, it's like then it just becomes an undeniable thing. It's like I might not be this might not be like my primary cup of tea,
Mhm.
but like in this moment of like watching this, it is like the most quality of whatever that is, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, definitely. And we've ultimately, as a band, we've benefited from that a lot in ways that I think a lot of people that don't know us or kind of like exist outside of our bubble probably don't understand. Like we could play like For the Children the same year as Zabulba and Bury Your Dead, and it's not weird. Like those are our friends, and you know, all the like the hardcore dudes that would put our band on a like tougher fest like that. Like they're our friends, and they get it. They get what it is. They're not trying to like they know that us being there is kind of just a cool addition. We're not trying to pretend to be something that we're not, you know?
Right. Were there any in the band's existence, were there any like festival lineups or even tour packages that like you were excited to say yes to, but you know full well if you like zoomed out to someone who's just getting into this, it would be like perplexing. And it'd be like, how is Wrist on
Uh-huh.
tour or doing this with XYZ?
I think
Are there
almost I think almost every one of our tours are like that, honestly,
every
man.
single one?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously like touring with Space Cowboy is kind of what people would expect, but then like I mean, we toured with, Traitors and Left to Suffer last album cycle. And yeah, I know a lot of people didn't get it. I mean, when we played the shows, they got it. Like when we played the shows, they were into it. Ultimately, like we do our thing. Like I'll play any show. We do our thing. And the people that like us, we have our own cult following of people that will come to whatever show and
Yeah. I
they'll
feel like it's
have fun.
almost sweeter to like go into go into a show where you almost feel like the underdog and then you see like I love seeing this where I'm watching a band that I love but I know is like maybe a little bit more on the outskirts or maybe even just like full on the outcast but like seeing
Right.
them win over the crowd is like it's like oh you you're not only killing it on like the music but you're killing it in the actual like why of why you're playing this show.
Totally, totally. No. And we speak to a very specific kind of kid. And I feel like when those kids see us, it doesn't really matter what the show is. Like it could be like a hardcore show or a deathcore show or a metalcore show or whatever. Like we could not fit in at all. But if that kind of person sees us, they get it. Like they feel
Mhm.
like a kinship to it. And to me, that's always been more important than whatever, anything else. Like, there are obviously tours we'd like to play. There's stuff that we would like to do. There's stuff that I think would get us to the right people a little bit quicker, but ultimately that's not that important.
Can you um give me a little bit more about that as far as like getting to the right person quicker? I'm curious what you mean by that.
Uh, Going on tours with bands that are like in the popular realms of metalcore, you know what I mean? Bands that would I think would maybe sound closer to what we sound like as opposed to like kind of stuff that's kind of different. Like if we
Mhm.
were able to do certain big metalcore tours, like yeah, it would be great. And I'm sure that would also get to people that wanted to hear us quick. But ultimately, like a lot of those decisions are out of our hands. Like we don't I mean, not to pull back the curtain on how things work, but like that isn't always in the hands of the bands that do it. Like the kids will always like have like their dream lineups, but a lot of times that isn't a feasible thing for a lot
Right.
of different reasons. And it has nothing to do with like whether it makes sense or not. It's more so about other aspects that have nothing to do with music. So if
Yeah.
we were in the most ideal of circumstances and we were able to do all the things that I think would be kind of most fitting for us, yeah, we would absolutely be able to get to all of those people immediately. But at the end of the day, you can only really control what you control.
Right.
What you can control always is your performance, how you're perceived, and the music that you put out. Like that is undeniable. No one can take that from you. So
Mhm.
that's how I look at it. I would rather be able to control what I can control than everything else. Let the cards fall where they may, you know?
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of circle back on the, I guess, when we're getting into the more current day lineup, and it's only in the last couple of years where, someone else is going to be picking up the bass and you sing only. Was that kind of like an end goal that you were wanting to hit, like even in the 2017, 18, 19s? Or was it more of like oh, I guess I could kind of do this?
Yeah, like so I wouldn't say in the very, very beginning that was the plan. We liked the fact that it was a three piece. Like the fact that the band was a three
Right.
piece was a unique kind of thing. But then when we added Tyler, I think it changed the dynamic enough to where it was like it would make sense to have a standalone bass player. And then
Right.
at that point, it was more so who wants to be the vocalist. And I wanted to be the vocalist, but also I liked the dynamic that we had. But when the last record came out, it was during COVID, so it changed a lot. We weren't able to go on tour immediately. The
Hmm.
plan was if it would have been a normal record, we would have gone immediately on tour right afterwards, and I probably would have still been the bass player because it was recorded with that being the idea. And even in the first music video, in the last Tango in Paris music video, I'm playing bass and singing because that
Right.
was, in a lot of ways, that was the plan. But with that extended period off, it kind of gave us time to really reflect on it. And I felt like that was the best time to do that switch because there was so much time that we were just spending waiting to tour that we might as well get someone that actually could do the bass and then fill out the lineup that way.
Right. And it's kind of interesting too, because in that music video and in that song, Isaac helped produce that record, but
He did,
like
yes.
he was in the video as well.
Right.
And he's been on the podcast a couple of times now, and
Yeah.
I'm I'm excited to see him eventually at one day like fronting a band, because I feel
Mhm.
like he could fill that job specifically
Yeah.
very well. But I
Yeah.
feel like, do you think that there was an aspect of, you know, if not having the feature on that song and then not having like, did you ever look back at that video and you're like, oh, this kind of looks cool with like the four of us and then someone else doing that? Like, did
Yeah.
that even play a part, or was that just kind of like
Yeah.
more of an afterthought?
No, that added to it as well. Like that, the
Mhm.
seeds of that, of the me as the vocalist thing, definitely started with "Misery Never Forgets," but really took traction when we were pre-proing "Replica of a Strange Love."
Mhm.
So we pre-proed "Replica" with Isaac. We went to Kentucky, and we spent a week at Isaac's parents' house pre-proing everything. So we spent every day with Isaac doing it. And the idea was that the bass was going to probably be something that was playable, but at the same time, I made it known, and I think it was kind of like an agreed upon thing that like we didn't want it to limit the creative process with
Right.
Replica of a Strange Love. We wanted that record to be the record that we wanted to make, like that we've been wanting to make, and it became that. But part of becoming that was that I thought it was good to the point where it needed a standalone frontman. So when Isaac did that for the music video, it was perfect because it was like, well, that is the ideal right there. You know what I mean? So it did work out that way in a kind of a cool visual, but it was already it was pretty much the wheels were already in motion for that for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's interesting because I was always curious when these kind of changes in the lineup happen with, different people from anything from like, someone like Jamie from Code Orange, like
Right.
doing the drums and vocals and then moving to that, as far as like, you know, as much as he's not playing the drums, like, I'm sure that him as a songwriter has an opinion about the drums and things like that. So it sounds like even when you were doing the record before this one that's coming up, it's like you're not wanting to be like, okay, I'm singing and playing bass at the same time, so it can only be this level of difficulty. It's like
Right.
you were still like, no, I don't want that to diminish whatever the part could be.
Right.
But now it's like it's no longer a factor for you.
No, not at all. And to be
Mhm.
fair too, like they were so the record so on Replica of a Strange Love, all the bass was recorded by Isaac. Um, Mostly because I felt like he was able to really kind of nail that down. But also because it was straightforward enough that I felt like anyone could record it. But with
Mhm.
that said, going forward, when Elaine joined the band, she kind of rewrote some of that to where it was a little bit more complicated in ways that made sense to those songs. So they've been retooled in certain ways bass wise. But no, I mean, you're completely right. Like it was never, I made it known from the very beginning, like I would like it to be simple enough to where I could play it, but I don't want it to be so simple where it's like there's something missing from the record. Like you
Mhm.
listen to it and you're like, there's something missing here. I kind of I've always enjoyed a more simple bass to begin with, so that helps a little bit. I think, a little bit more of a groove bass is it drives songs, especially songs that have some noodling in it. Like I think it makes it move a little bit better. So that played into it too, but ultimately, yeah,
Yeah.
all of that kind of played towards that record coming out.
So speaking of records, let's talk about this new one that's coming out on the 29th of March.
Mhm.
Talk to me about what fans of the band can expect, personal like things that really bring you a lot of joy, whether it was like a certain risk that you guys were trying to do with a specific track. Yeah, talk to me about that.
So this next record is definitely our most kind of our most thought out one, I would say. We spent so what we did was we last January we spent a month in the woods in New Jersey recording with Randy LaBeouf, who did he did Dying Wish and Acacia Strain and Orthodox and
Hmm.
Boundaries, a bunch of other bands. Um, he produced, co-wrote, mixed, mastered all of it. And he was very, very instrumental in doing it. We had ideas, we had a bunch of ideas, we had a bunch of riffs that we brought out there, but there was never really like a full record written until we were there. So we tried to do this in a very maybe old school way, maybe even a way that most bands don't do stuff anymore. Um, we showed up there without really anything, and then we pre-pro'd and wrote all the songs in the first 2 weeks of the record, or the first 2 weeks of us being there, and then we tracked everything for the next 2 weeks and finished the record that way. What makes that really interesting is that the lyric writing process ended up happening while we were there as well in the second two weeks of our being there.
Hmm.
So what it created was this very interesting thing where like I've never had it to where I sat down and wrote a full kind of thing. Like I graduated with a degree in English, so I've written a lot in my life, but never to this level of importance. And so what it
And also
created,
under different constraints as well,
yeah,
because you're
exactly.
only there to do that.
Exactly. And
Mm.
to add on to that, to maybe add to the mystique of this band, we only left that cabin 3 times in a month, like physically left. And by that, I mean, we went to the grocery store. And even further than that, I only left 2 of those
Right.
times. And Nate left 0 of those times. He never left. I only left twice. The other 3 left 3 times, but it was just to go to the grocery store, get food, and then come back. And we cooked every single night. um, yeah, we never really left, and it created kind of this stir crazy madness that helped with writing lyrics. It helped a lot. Like it really helped me lock in every
Mm.
single day.
Did
And
you have like themes and ideas in mind, or was it just like because this whole aspect of like being able to go somewhere for an extended period of time and like you said, like almost come with like less than what you would in like past experiences, but like
Mhm.
under that pressure and under those specific conditions, it can create a lot of like inspiration in the moment.
Yeah.
Um Granted, this is also like a very like this is a privilege at the end of the day because like not a lot of people can afford to like do that for an extended period of time, but like
Oh, exactly.
personally it's been something that I've wanted to check off of my musical bucket list for a long time because I feel like that like under those parameters I feel like a lot of really cool art can be created. So anyways,
No,
not
I
going to the grocery store, cooking.
mhm.
Talk to me about like the lyrical side as far as how you were writing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so all adds into what you were saying too. Like we were all in such a specific time in our life where we all wanted that as well. We wanted the process, and really what the process was involved a lot of suffering, and the lyrics all needed to reflect that in a lot of ways. I've never written a concept record before, but I think this would be the closest thing to an actual concept record for this band. Lyrically, the other records were a little bit more like journal entries kind of thing. Like they were all written in the general same time frame, but they were written kind of from different perspectives. So I would like write a lot of the songs would be written from like kind of like my perspective and like things that were happening to me. And then other songs would be written about like someone else, but they would be written kind of through my eyes from someone else's perspective. This record is entirely written about um, everyone else. To be blunt, the record is kind of one where I take a step back and I become the man in the mirror. I'm the one that's being reflected back on. So what I'm writing is what I'm seeing, and it all follows in the same exact kind of format where it's the degeneration of kind of myself in the face of kind of the societal changes of life and the current age that we're in. Like
Mm.
it touches on a lot of different kind of absurdist, surrealist kind of things. I was really into nihilism for the last record, and it was something that I put a lot of thought into when I was writing those lyrics. And this one is um, almost a response to that from the other side, where it's almost so past nihilism that it's kind of absurdism, like it's misanthropic. Like I'm like
Mm.
looking at these much larger contexts and these much larger topics of the world in a way that's like misanthropic. Like I see it for what it is, and I'm more so just reporting back what I'm seeing in the mirror
Mm.
as opposed to writing journal entries. Like which is a very a very metalcore screamo kind of way to write lyrics, is kind of just like writing how you feel, and this one was more so about me writing what I see. And so that's
Interesting.
that's the general idea of this whole record. For the most part, well, not for the most part, there aren't any love songs on it. I'd kind of fallen into that trap a lot for the last records, and this one is definitely not a love record,
Mm.
not a love song record. It's much more of a kind of a a my version of reporting on kind of the world. So
Mhm. Um, yeah, I'm very excited because I checked out the single that you guys dropped
mhm.
recently and watched the video. Made by Cameron, correct?
Yeah, Cameron Nunez. Yeah,
Cameron Nunez. He's been on the pod before. Big fan of him.
he's great.
But
He's
yeah,
great.
yeah. I'm excited to kind of see, other singles and other things that start to kind of
Hmm.
trickle in. And I think I love when bands of any subgenre can really lean into the visual component of
Right.
like anything that they're doing. When I was like discovering a lot of the 90s bands that we were kind of like reminiscing on,
Hmm.
a lot of it for me was like really dynamic and really visually stimulating music videos.
Hmm.
And the one that you guys put out is like that and then some.
Thank you, man.
And
I appreciate
I,
that.
I, I think that seems to be a very important component into how you guys are rolling this out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's always been very important to the band to kind of have a visual aspect, but now I think it's more so than ever before. The art is all done by a guy named Alex Ekman Lawn, who lives in Philadelphia, but he does this very, very cool kind of like um, it's not even collage-esque, it's more so like kind of like repurposed kind of imaging that he like distorts and turns into like all these cool things.
Mm,
I've been a really, really big fan of kind of 90s album artwork. And so I had shown him a lot of different things that I thought were cool, kind of that I had liked that basically use the same thing, but also kind of speak to the general theming of the record. Like um I think it's an interesting kind of concept to bring back some of the messianic, Christ-like imagery, especially with kind of like a um, a broken, like mechanical industrial kind of vibe. And so he kind of had some different ideas with it, and we ended up landing on what we did, which I think ultimately came out really really cool.
hmm Going back to the whole like actual recording process of everything, like a note in here that we have kind of subtly danced around, but never like hit at the top of the nail is like the fact that the majority of all the members of this band are spread all across the country.
Right.
So like, you have people from, all quadrants, but like it almost logistically it makes more sense to just be like, hey, let's just spend a month in the same place and kind of like do all that. But like I'm sure that's been like, has that been an ongoing challenge or hurdle with the, all the years that the band has been going where it's like, you have Tyler joining in, but then it's
Mhm.
like, oh, we can only afford to do one jam with him before we go on this tour.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the aspect of the band. That's been like kind of the nature of the beast from the very beginning for us.
hmm
Because yeah, right now, as of right now, Elaine and I live in Las Vegas. Brian lives in Louisville, Kentucky. Tyler lives in Wilmington, Delaware, and Nate lives in Winchester, Virginia. So we don't live anywhere near each other. Like none of us really do. Uh,
right.
that has ultimately been super beneficial for us, though, in a lot of ways that I think a lot of people wouldn't expect. We have so many different home bases that it actually is, in some ways, cheaper to tour because when you only have to fly out two members to start a tour on the East Coast, it's a lot cheaper than spending, $500, $600 in gas just to get you and your gear and all your stuff, all your band members across the country for a 3-day drive so you could start a tour on the East Coast when you're from Las Vegas, which is what Vegas bands have to do
Right.
often. It's what Spirit World has had to do a couple times as well. Like you don't that in that situation you don't really kind of benefit as much, but when you fly out and then you practice on the other side of the country and then you rent your van and your trailer and your gears all over there, then it's awesome. But
hmm
then on the flip side, if we wanted to do West Coast shows, we fly them out here, and I have, a bunch of gear and stuff, and we can just, start a tour from Vegas, which we've also done that before too. So
Hmm.
it's it works in both ways. It's challenging, but it's also very kind of beneficial at times in ways that other bands don't have that. They won't have
Right.
that kind of that beneficiary.
Yeah, I never would have thought that they're just like splitting up your band on, the western and eastern halves have is almost like, you just kind of build up two little, little
Yeah,
empires and then you just kind of like, okay, well, we'll come to you or you come to us versus like, okay, we have to bring everything all the way across.
yeah.
So, yeah,
The
that's a
the other
really
thing,
interesting way that you guys have done that.
yeah, the other thing that I think a lot of younger bands are kind of realizing as like a challenge is when you're from one coast, the other coast is more difficult to play. But for
Mm,
us, we've never had any problems doing East or West Coast stuff because we have fan bases on both because we're both from there. You know what I mean?
right.
So, like, if we want to do a West Coast tour, it's easy. Like, we're already locked in to the whole thing. And if we want to do an East Coast tour, it's the same thing. It's easy. We're already fully locked into all of those promoters and venues because we've all done it. I mean, me personally, I have played West Coast and Southwest and kind of the South, like ad nauseum over the past like 15 years. Like I know all of those promoters and I always have. So like that's always going to be easy. But then at the same time, like our other band members, they played a bunch of stuff on the East Coast. Like we want to go play the Northeast. They have that locked down because they've been playing
Mhm.
that their whole lives. You know what I mean? So in that way too, it's very, very beneficial.
So I was just very confused or curious, because normally what we do when we've filmed bands in the past is I'll put when I'm uploading the set on YouTube is I'll do the band name and then in brackets like where they're based, and I
Mm-hmm.
just do that as like a separate playlist because there's many bands that we've filmed double digits worth amount of times.
Yeah.
But even if I film a band once, like I think it's just cool to have this running list of all these different playlists. So I was like, and sometimes, you have bands who are spread out over multiple cities. So I'll do the state. Usually my reference point is like whatever the band camp says, like I'll just match that.
Right.
So just when we were been talking about this, I was like, what have I put for Wristmeetrazor from their Wild Rose 2019 set?
Did you put
And
Washington, D.C.?
I did. And I'm like, wait, where is that in the mix of all that?
So that ended up, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe there was one interview.
I'm just gonna
One
update it
interview.
now to say USA.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Maybe
That's accurate.
there was one interview where Washington D.C. came up in the very, very beginning of the band, and then it went on. We had a Wikipedia for a while, and so maybe I know it went up on the Wikipedia page, and then once it was up there, as soon as you typed the band name, it was right there. And so we've gotten that a bunch, the Washington
Mm.
D.C. thing. Jonah's
But
from
no. Oh, was Jonah from there or from the
not
area? Or?
not exactly. He's from like
Oh, okay.
30, 40 minutes away from Washington, D.C. So I guess that makes the most sense. Um,
Sure.
but yeah, we were never really from Washington.
Wristmeetrazor is based nowhere.
Yeah, we're based nowhere.
Coast to coast.
That's why when I started all the social media, especially like Twitter, I put our location as nowhere. And I think it still
Mhm.
says nowhere. But like that's what I did when I very, very first created that platform. I was like, we're not from anywhere. Like we're from nowhere.
Right.
Planet Earth,
It's
I
funny.
guess.
There's a band from Regina,
Mhm.
and they're like a new metal band,
Mhm.
and just because it's such a weird thing that still plays a part where it's like you hear, oh, this band's from Las Vegas, and then you almost have some weird preconceived notion as far as what they sound like if they're sick or not versus you hear California or you hear New York or
Right.
whatever. So when you hear Regina, Saskatchewan, you don't think much of what it could be, but
Yeah.
what they do is they just say they're North American new metal versus
Yeah.
anything else. But I'm like, yeah, you could just take the whole continent, I guess.
Yeah. Are you
So,
talking about Flashback?
yeah, of course.
They're sick. They're very sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Have you
I like
guys
them.
played with them before?
No. The singer was in
Yeah, Nathan was in Stepping Stone,
he was in
and
Stepping
they
Stone. Yeah.
they played with you guys for Wild
We
Rose, so
played
that's maybe where they
Yeah,
come.
we played a bunch of shows. Well, actually, we played multiple shows with Stepping Stone because we played Flyover Fest once with them, and then I think maybe we played like a connecting show or something with them. And
Mhm.
then what's funny is that in 2020 we were supposed to play another Wild Rose, and when we were going to do that, we were going to do a full tour with Stepping Stone in Canada, and that ended
Oh,
up
really?
yeah.
That's
That
crazy.
see that it was going to
That's an
be
unlikely
yeah.
duo that I've ever heard.
It was going to be us, Trench, and then Stepping Stone through Canada to go to
Mhm.
Wild Rose because that was the year Knock Loose was going to play. We were going to play the same year as Knock Loose and Judiciary.
Right.
Um, yeah, and that was
I'm
the
gonna
tour
try
we had
to.
booked.
I'm trying because I remember. Yeah, maybe I'm gonna try to see if I can find that old flyer
Yeah, it
because that
was up.
lineup was like. I feel like at the time, some of the bands that were scheduled to play, like it's so different now with
So
either
different.
a
Yeah,
release that they did. Yeah. So Madball, Knock Loose, Never Ending Game, Judiciary. Oh yeah, Wrist Razor, Drain, and then Regional Justice Center. That's
yeah, it would
so
have been
crazy.
insane, right?
Yeah, like Never Ending Game, Judiciary, and Drain alone. I feel like those are entirely different bands from
Yeah,
what would have been
yeah,
you know those things. But
yeah,
that's
yeah.
so cool. I didn't know that. That's very awesome.
Yeah, no, like dude, we were really, really bummed that that one didn't happen because that would have been an amazing show.
Yeah,
That the world was deprived because of COVID for sure.
yeah. Uh,
Um,
s- s- Speaking of other great Western Canada bands,
mhm,
one of the last things I guess before things went south in the 2020 was y'all did a run with Suration.
mhm. Yeah.
Any stories or memories from that tour specifically?
Lots of good ones. Lots of good ones. We played I love Suration. We played Texas. We did Texas with them. It was the first time they had ever done Texas. It was the first time they had ever been to Bucky's before, so they really, really liked Bucky's, and they bought
Mhm.
all kinds of Bucky's stuff. And then the coolest thing we did with them on that tour was we went to the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, which is where the Branch Davidian, kind of the David Koresh thing, Branch
Mhm.
Davidian had their whole thing, and the FBI burned down the compound and killed all the women and children and stuff like that. We went. They have that church still around. It still exists, and there are still people that are whatever Davidians or whatever they are. I can't remember what they're called. They do have a name, but
Okay.
I'm blanking on it right now. But we went
They're
to the
not
church.
important enough to get it right.
They are important. They are interesting for sure.
Sure.
They
Yeah.
don't really exist anymore. But for whatever reason, I can't think of it. But so we went to that compound. That church still exists. And then both bands, we went and just hung out there and kind of talked to the people that were still there. And they have like this very detailed kind of breakdown of what happened there. And I thought it was really interesting. It was a spot I always wanted to hit, and it was cool that we hit it with Suration.
Hmm.
There was like a guy there that was arguing with the religious extremists that still work there about about all. I don't even remember what they were arguing about. It was very entertaining though, and I
Right.
think a very American, which was awesome for Suration to see the most American of tragedies based on the U.S. government and religious extremists. That's about as American as it gets. So
Right.
that
Yeah.
was cool.
When you can do that and in the same week go to Bucky's, like,
Yeah. Well, it was funny,
it's the full extent of America.
dude. What's so funny is that we literally went from Bucky's there. Like it was like the big
It was almost in the
capitalist
same
gas
breath.
station. Yeah,
Yeah.
it literally was big capitalist gas station to uh, former religious extremist compound to arguing about the FBI with religious extremists, like literally
Yeah.
happening within about a 5 hour kind of base.
Yeah.
Awesome. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
That I always remember that.
yeah. I feel like as a Canadian who has had his Bucky's cherry popped before, it almost becomes like an
Mhm.
obsession when you go there for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really
It
want
sucks.
to. No, you go.
I I was gonna say it sucks because we've kind of been spoiled on it, so it's not special for us at all. Like
Mm.
it's cool like the first couple times, but then whenever it's someone's first time, like that's special. So then you want to
Yeah.
take them for the
Yeah,
first time.
because you
You
get
want
to
to just
watch the people indulge. You're like, whoa, they have what the fuck are
it's like
corn nuts, you know? Like,
yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, like the people watching, and then there's like the brash Texasness of it all. Like
Mhm.
it's cool. Like it's
Yeah,
something I enjoy a lot.
yeah, yeah. It's almost like when you are at a show and
Mhm.
then you get to see someone who's like grabbed the mic for the first time or like is stage diving for the first time, and they're like, you see their world and their worldview changing. You're like,
Right.
I remember when I was doing that,
Yeah, for
X
sure.
decades ago or whatever.
For sure. And Texas is also like it's just a great scene to play shows in. So those shows with Suration were all great shows. So it was good vibes. I like that the most, like when you're on tour with a band that you hang out with, but the shows are like going well enough that it's just good vibes all around. Those are good
Yeah,
memories. So yeah, I
yeah,
love the Suration guys. I love that new record they put out last year. They're great.
yeah. Um, Speaking of being on tour and band related things, I saw in an interview that you guys have a bucket of candy that sits on the dash of your van
We
and you
did.
just hand it out to passerbys,
So we did that.
which is kind of like the opposite of what you're taught as far as taking candy from people in vans.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, we're the strangers that give out the
Yeah,
candy.
exactly.
That's us. Um, yeah, so it's interesting. We did have that. We had a we after when we did the Space Cowboy record release tour in 2021, it was right after Halloween. And so we stayed we stayed as festive as we could for that whole tour.
Mhm.
But after that, we decided we just keep it. So for the all of the touring we did in 2022, we kept the candy there, and we were on tour with Traders and Left to Suffer in like Florida or something, and there were like drunk people coming out of the show, and then at some point they had like stopped and they just were staring in the van, and like me and Nate were sitting in the front, and I rolled down the window and was like, "What's up?" And they were like, "Is that candy?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Can we get some?" I'm like, "Of course." We just handing out, and then all their friends started coming over. It was great. It was
Right.
awesome. I think the demise of the candy and where the candy currently is I'm actually not entirely sure where it is. Actually, I'm assuming it got thrown away. I know Static Dress used the van on one of their first U.S. tours and had like a major breakdown. And after that, I haven't seen the candy anymore. It's been gone.
Mm.
So it might be also in a dumpster somewhere in New York. So there's lots of dumpster diving that you could do and find Wristmeetrazor lore.
Yeah.
It's all in landfills across North America somewhere.
I mean,
Somewhere.
if we were rebuilding the candy inventory for, let's say, an upcoming wrist tour, maybe around this new
Uh,
record, um,
yeah.
what do you think would be the candy of choice for each member of the band? That's an interesting
Oh man.
thought
Yeah.
experiment.
That's that's tough because I feel like we all have kind of different tastes for like sweet kind of things. Because
Right.
like me personally, I like sour a little bit more. So I usually go with like Sour Patch Kids and stuff like that. That's what I would
Yeah.
probably go with.
Get some sour
Um,
keys, some of that.
yeah. We're also all vegan. And Nate's vegetarian, but the rest of us are vegan. So we don't there's definitely stuff that's off limits for as far
For
as like
sure.
what we would bring. Like we don't bring chocolate or anything like that. Um, but I think I think the other guys would probably choose a variety because so the candy bucket that we did have was basically it was a lot of Smarties, which we ate a lot of. It was a lot of Tyler really liked the little I can't remember what the little lollipops are called that you whatever the little lollipops are called that usually are handed out at Halloween times. He had a
Right.
bunch of those in there, which were consistent. So he would definitely choose those. I think I think I think Elaine would probably choose probably go with Starburst or something like that, something chewy, which
Mhm.
we had a bunch of. Dum Dums were the ones, the little lollipops. There was a lot of Dum Dums that we had. Um,
A lot of dum dums,
mhm,
sucking on some dum dums. You know.
exactly, exactly. Uh, yeah,
You were perplexing my mind when you said no chocolate, and then you
yeah.
said we had lots of Smarties. Because as a
Mhm.
Canadian, our Smarties
Yeah, our chocolate, right?
very different. Yeah, I was just like,
That's
wait, no, oh, Rockets. Okay, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So Smarties in America are these little chalky, like flavored candies that are basically just sugar. It's basically
yeah.
like compressed sugar into a little pill, and then you chew on it, and then it
Right.
bursts into like whatever chalkiness in your mouth.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, those Skittles, Starbursts, those Dum Dums, which were just the little lollipops.
Yeah,
That was all of it.
that's a quality bucket to
Yeah,
dive into
you
on
know,
a late night drive.
exactly. See, that was my main go-to is when I was doing late night drives and I would start to get tired, I'd be like, well, just give me any of it. Like I would just any of it to like take your mind off of the monotony of driving.
Hmm.
It's good. It's really good.
So I'm for this candy bucket
Hmm.
on the road.
Yeah.
And we were talking about like the differences of the bevs you consume while on tour versus at home. Like do you try to stay away from having like a sweets bucket in your house per se? But
No, you know what's funny is that Elaine just brought this over. We actually have a sweets bucket, like
there you
literally
go.
it sits right there all the time. We
Do you got a Smarties you want to show me? Some American shit?
I don't even know if we have Smarties in here. There's Starburst in here though. The other one that I didn't think of, actually, this would be Tyler's go-to, Swedish Fish for sure. This
Oh,
100% would
Tyler's
be.
a Swedish Fish man.
He
I
loves
see.
Swedish Fish. So yeah, we had a bunch of Swedish Fish in the candy bucket in the van, but they got eaten so quickly that they were gone. I think that those might have left on the first tour. They might have been gone. This is what a dum dum is essentially.
Yeah, yeah.
And there were a lot of these because these are you can buy them so cheap. There's so many. And these are the best if you're like tired at 2 a.m. You just get one of these and then it
Right.
kills at least 10, 15 minutes. You know what I mean? And then you could do a lot of them too. Yeah. I mean, they're so small, like you could kill a good hour doing like 5. Like that's how that's our drug of choice. Our drug of choice is candy for sure. Because we're all straight edge as well. So we don't do drugs. We just eat
so
candy.
4/5 vegan and all straight edge.
Besides Brian, so 4/5 both actually.
Besides Brian,
yeah,
of course. Yeah.
4/5 of both. But Brian doesn't drive, so it's
Right.
it's candy. That's the drug of choice in caffeine.
What do you think is an overrated candy? What do you think fucking sucks for the sweets?
Dude, I
Sucks
think
in the bad way.
sucks in a bad way. You know, when I was growing up, I would have said Jolly Ranchers. I really didn't like them, but as I became an adult, I do like Jolly Ranchers a lot now too because they are also vegan. You know,
okay. I
yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah, those are ideal ones. What sucks for candy? Man, it's really tough because for most of my life, I wasn't super into candy. I was more so into like savory stuff, savory snacks. But being vegan, being into candy is important because it's one of the few gas station snacks that are always going to be good. Like you can
For sure.
get those almost anywhere. As far as like what I don't like, I don't really like candies that are like a little bit like more bland. Like there's people that kind of like the toned down kind of candy flavors, and I'm not really into those as much. Like to be honest, I don't like Smarties. That is one that I would definitely go against if I had a choice.
Sure.
Chalky ones, the chalky candies I don't necessarily like as much, but
I feel like they're fine, but they don't do anything
yeah,
of like individualism well. Like
it's
it's
not
just kind of like did I enjoy this or did I hate it? Like it kind of is middle of the bar.
it's like eating Tums for candy, essentially.
Yes, yeah, that's a perfect way of describing that.
It's like there might be a moment if I had like a stomach ache where I'd be like, okay, let's go, let's hit the Smarties. But for the most part, if I'm going into a gas station, that's not getting chosen. That's
Yeah.
not even in the top.
That's not where my hard-earned dollars are going. Yeah.
That's not even like these are not even top 20. Not even close.
They're not even on the map.
They're not. But if it's 4 a.m. in the van and it's the only thing in that bucket, then that's what I'm eating.
Right.
I
was
gonna say I'm not picky when it comes to food. Like typically I'm not the one that's like
it will be consumed.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know if this falls under the category, but I've like never come around to like the cinnamon hearts that you get around Valentine's Day.
You don't like those? See, I love those.
I can.
See,
it's
like
it's too much. The flavor profile is too intense.
It's a lot, but that's another thing. Like I really like the like red hot, the little candy balls that are like super hot. I love those.
That's within the same family.
Yeah, for sure. And then the Mike and Ike's, the cinnamon Mike and Ike's, those are all the same thing where it's like you eat one and your whole mouth just tastes like cinnamon, which I totally understand where you're coming from because like that's a very specific thing. And if you're not ready for it, it'll fuck up your taste buds for a while. Those are the ones that if you eat those, like just constantly, it fucks up your tongue. I don't know if you've had that happen before. They're the only candy that if you eat, it'll like kind of like rub like little holes in your tongue. It's bad.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Man.
yeah. It fucks.
Maybe I haven't delved much into that to even to fall into that trap, but I'm You're giving
it's
me
for the
more
best.
reasons not to even
Yeah.
explore it.
It's for the best. It's a very specific thing. I can't even do them
Right.
all the time. But yeah, but I think this all goes back to the sour thing. I really enjoy the sour candies, which also do that, which also like rub little lesions in
Yeah,
your
but like
tongue.
sour Skittles or Sour Patch Kids aren't gonna like create craters in your
Well, I
in your
mean,
tongue.
sour Skittles, I've had those mess my tongue up bad. I
Yeah,
don't know. They're
that's true.
pretty
There's
brutal.
been some batches that I've had that have
Yeah.
been like, oh
Yeah.
fuck,
They're
like
if
whoever
they
was in the lab was
Yeah.
cooking.
If they go crazy with the sour Skittles, it's game over. You can't really eat those. Like they're almost inedible, and that's why I like them. It's like warheads. Like those things are barely edible.
Mhm.
But there's something about it that's good. This also ties very nicely back to the beginning of our conversation about Bevs because I love kombucha, like powerful like energy drinks, uh sparkling water. Like these are things that
Mhm.
also aren't necessarily super enjoyable, but there's something about it that just kind of scratches an itch. It's the same thing
Yeah.
with like warheads, sour Skittles. Like you might not entirely enjoy it, but it also is there's something about it that's, I don't know.
I didn't think talking about candy was gonna like
Yeah.
maybe bow tie this whole conversation, but
Yeah.
it's almost like
Yeah.
anything that Justin's gonna be partaking in, like
It,
it's better if it's to the max
yeah. It,
in
it,
the
it, it,
extremes.
it is better if it's to extremes and it hurts a little bit, a little bit of pain. It's always good. Like, and that's black coffee too. Like, and I love coffee and I also like bitter coffee, and bitter
Mhm.
coffee hurts. Like it is there's just enough pain involved in drinking it that it makes it very satisfying.
Hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? Anything super bitter has like an aspect of it that's not exactly enjoyable. It's not
Mhm.
sweet per se.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, this
take it
is
all.
so funny how we've come full circle.
Yeah.
Just through talking about sour candies.
Yes,
So Justin, I have one more question before we start to wrap up
for sure.
our conversation here. I asked everyone on the podcast to end off with a favorite Mosh related story. So that's anything that is first to your head. Could be
Hmm.
something you did. Could have happened to you, wholesome, gruesome,
Yeah,
Wristmeetrazor, spirit world related or not.
you're right. Interesting because I don't. So I've for background on me, I've really only moshed like once in my life or twice in my life, and I was very young.
Hmm.
I was probably in like 10th grade. So my mosh related stuff doesn't necessarily come from that. A lot of like the fun stuff that I know as far as mosh goes is kind of stuff that we've seen on the road and stuff that I've like antagonized out of people because I enjoy rowdy crowds. I think we went from a band that didn't really want people to mosh to being a band that was very okay with the mosh. So
Hmm.
that ended up working out cool for us. I think one of the stories that kind of comes to the front of my mind is playing Vegas in this last tour that we did. We had essentially like at one point we had like all of the young kids in Vegas that I see going to shows and all the time all hit the pit at the exact same time for a breakdown in Last Tango in Paris, and then they all jumped up on stage to try to sing along too. And it was like this cool full circle moment for me because I've been going to shows in Vegas since I was really young. And what I always really like kind of dreamed of was to be able to play a show in Vegas where like it went off, right? It like went off
Right.
the same way it did like when I was a teenager and going to high school and going to shows. And it did. Like it was like all the kids that were kind of young getting into it. And it was a very unique moment where I was able to kind of see multiple aspects of kind of a moment while it played out. And I kind of saw myself and the whole situation and my kind of past and then the future. It was very cool. And I think moshing kind of creates that very unique kind of bond that you don't really get in too many other music scenes. It's cool.
Hard agree. And yeah, it's super cool when you're able to, you know, like I have dreams for me with different projects of like going back to like, places that I originally grew up and was discovering hardcore and
Uh-huh.
just to be able to see other people partake in the mosh in those and it is definitely like a surreal experience when you're on tour and you're playing somewhere where you have no connections and
Right.
you're like wow like
Yeah.
like someone is risking a potential huge hospital like
Right.
visit off of this part that I wrote in my bedroom in
Hmm.
X number of years ago.
It's cool.
But I think it means much more when it's on home base for sure. At
Yeah.
least for you.
It's
Yeah.
it's timeless too. Like moshing is a timeless thing because you can kind of go through the years, and a lot of the styles, even if they change a little bit, they look very similar. So
Right.
when you're like watching it happening, you could really place yourself in any generation of band or song or whatever. You at that moment you become kind of one with the whole bigger thing. You know what I mean? You become one with the bands of the past and the future. And I don't know, it's a very cool, almost spiritual thing that I don't know, I thought of very introspectively while it was happening. It was very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Moshing is spiritual. That's the
Mhm.
that's
I,
the quote of this episode.
I agree. I agree. Of
So dude, very, very thankful for all the time that you've given us today. All the
course.
Wrist Meets Razor links and all your personal links will be in the description and the show note. Anything you want to shout out, anything you want to plug, or anything you want to send the people off on.
So Degeneration out March 29th. Our single for Trepanation is on YouTube right now. You can check that out. Um, thank you so much for having me and supporting the band. I love Scoped Exposure. Keep watching those episodes because they're all great.
Appreciate that. And hopefully, I don't know if it'll be this year, but I'm hoping that Risk comes back up through Western Canada at some point.
Yeah,
I think it's long overdue, honestly.
I agree, and I ideally it will be this year. So hopefully, fingers crossed.